on a placer drainage this morning, Lauren and I, and we thought we'd show you. We dug open we hit a drift hole here, and we know the old timers came in under this bench, and I'll kind of go around the site here a little bit, but it's very interesting to the fact that the high energy channel in this drainage isn't where the old timers mined, which is kind of what I've said as we've gone through our series on placer mining. So we'll kind of wander around here a little bit, and then we'll kind of show you down in the drift hole also. So coming out, looking at the drainage here, we can see the old timer workings here, which are all fairly small cobble and rock in the drainage. I don't know if that's freaking safe to step on or not. Yep. And you can see that there was some pretty good-sized piles here that they were doing as they came up the drainage. But there's a real lack of large rocks. Here we got a few over against this outside control. Some of this was actually, there's a road up above here that was put in at a later date, so some of these boulders were rolled off the face up there. But as you walk the rock pile, you notice that there's really nothing larger than a small watermelon at the best. And that means they didn't hit the high energy channel for the most part. Got a real mix of granite and limestone. Kind of a granite outcropping up here to our left, but all small cobble, which tells us for one thing that they did not find the high energy channel. But when you kind of see areas like this where you can almost see that there's a portal or something going into the bank, those were the drift mines that I'm talking about to pay attention to on a placer drainage, because some of them are water channels. When there's a water ditch up above, there'll be a water channel coming down in, and they use that as they mined. And as you can see, there is a couple big rocks right there. But you look for where they actually tunneled, because when they tunneled, they needed more value out of the gold than if they were just ground sluicing like they did here with the rock piles. So you want to try to identify those areas where you get into bigger rocks and the possibility of them drift mining, because those benches, if they drift mined them, they were higher value probably than the creek channel as you see it today and what they mined. So always pay attention to benches. So we'll go back and cross over here, and we'll get into that drift a little bit, and I'll show you the placer gravels that are definitely there, and the one boulder we pulled out with the excavator as we were digging in there to try to open that little tunnel in there. This one doesn't go far back in, it's kind of caved in, but it still gives you the indication of what we're talking about and things to pay attention to and understand about placer drifting. We get in here, and Augie's going in first, I guess. And there's Lauren coming up out of the hole. He was down in there looking around.
Gotta do this, Lauren.
No, definitely. Here, I'm going to use that light too, Lauren, because I don't know how much of this I can get on the camera, but I will try to get what I can here. So, as we go underground, we've got very good placer gravels as we get down under here. And there is, I'll try to light some of this up if I can. There is some bigger boulders up to the left up into this corner in here. It's not huge, but it is there. And they went back in here a ways, so very, very interesting to be able to actually see what they were, doing underground in an actual drift. Yeah, Chloe. You got to get out of the way. But when Lauren was excavating this, while we were up here, right at the bottom there alongside the drift tunnel, this is the size of rocks we're looking for. For scale there, I can get my hand up there, but that's a 4 foot long by a little better than 2 foot wide, 2 foot high rock. That's the kind of stuff that's a high energy channel. And that's still right underneath the bench here that we're standing on. As we go along here, that's the kind of rocks that you kind of want to be looking for when you're finding a high energy channel in a drainage like this. So this area in front of us out here where Lauren is there and the dogs is all bench up to the road here where the four-wheelers are. So we know that there's a fairly substantial area here that can still be mined. This was an upper water ditch where they had a water ditch coming from somewhere up above and coming down along here to dump water in the creek where they needed it as they were mining. And probably not enough water in this situation, or they would have taken this whole bench out. Now, today with equipment and that, this isn't an issue. Here's another thing to look for as you're walking these placer drainages, is basically a caved in area that shows no signs of surface digging. So we've got right here, we've got an actual caved in area in here. That's a drift that settled, and then it went off a little bit that way. So they mined from below in the drainage up through here underneath, because there's no piles of dirt, no rock on the surface, just the country organics. So that really gives you the indication to what level they went. This is actually another drift hole where this stump is here. It's hollow down underneath all in there. And that's a cave in also. Same thing. That drift caved in straight down, so there's no rock pile, no debris on top of the ground. And as you go around in this drainage, you see a lot of this where they came in and drifted under, and there was a road put in here at one point for logging over the top of part of this. But this is at the mouth of the creek. The creek is below us here. This is a drift tunnel where it was coming in, and the portal itself caved in, which could easily be opened to see how far back in they got. But that may be in our future, because judging by what we see here, we've got quite a bit of depth. We're probably 16 to 18 feet above the creek right there, above that water level. So we've got a lot of depth in here to kind of probably work through to test all the way down to basically get into that high energy channel. We can see some boulders sticking out in a few spots in this bench on this side here. So there's a good chance that was a deterrent for them from mining this, is just the size of the rocks and the amount of work. They just kept going upstream and working it that way, because it took a lot of labor to move all those big rocks to get to that better gravels, even if it was rich. And how rich this drainage was, we don't know. We do know that it was mined for about 7 miles. Some below here and quite a bit above here. So as we're standing on the bench, we can see the smaller cobble rock piles within the drainage and how they went up against the bank, but it seems that as soon as they got against the bigger boulders in the bank is where they kind of backed away from it. But there's very, very good signs that these benches in here still hold some pretty extreme values based on the mining above here and the mining below here. And we've kind of cleaned up the road enough we could get access up into this property, and it's probably on our list of next year testing some deep holes and see what's possibly here yet. Is there a shaft up there? No? All right. Well, on the way back here, on this bench going back down toward our camp here, I will show you one. It's a shaft hole, and you can tell the difference from a drift hole and a shaft, because with the shaft they usually will make a ring of dirt around it, a collar. So you can see that they shafted it to find the outside limitation of the drainage on this side of the drainage. The other side of the drainage, the controls are fairly obvious because there's bedrock over across those rock piles. And it becomes fairly obvious that that was the limiting control on that side of the drainage. So we'll come back on with a little more here in a minute. All right, now here what we have is a shaft on the upper perimeter of the control of the hillside on the drainage. The drainage is over here, and then we got the bench here, and we're hitting the upper control of the bench, and this was a big shaft that they drifted away from. They shafted it, and then they drifted back, probably drifted in from the creek and then shafted this, is my guess, to just get the rocks out easier, because you've got a pretty good header pile here of gravels and stuff that they pulled up, and then there's somewhat of a collar ridge all the way around it. So it's obvious that it was a shaft versus an actual collapse of the drift itself. But we're quite a ways up away from the creek here. We're a good 100 feet up the hillside on the bench, and probably where I'm standing, I'm guessing I'm about 16 feet above the water in the creek at this point. And in the background here you can see some of our logs, the trees we had to take out to put that cabin in up here. So we had to do a little logging as well. Oh. All right, we're at a it could have been a shaft, but there's not a lot of piling around it, so I'm assuming it was a drift hole here. At this point, we're about a mile below where we were filming earlier here. And it has a ladder sticking up out of the hole yet, so that's pretty neat. What's left of a ladder. I think you can see that right in here. But the amount of drifting that went on down here on these lower benches and stuff, here's another hole that looks to be a collapse for the most part. Maybe a little collaring around it. It could have been a shaft, but it looks like it was probably another caved in drift hole. A little cobble brought up on the top here between the two holes. So somebody did a little digging. They got into a little bit bigger rock here. Placer rock. We did some logging down in here too and took some firewood for the home. But I'll walk along these drifts and show you that there's a pretty good drift here or pretty good bench on this side of the drainage, which may or may not have value that you don't know until you actually trench it and dig into it. But judging by the fact that there is drifts, there's a good chance there's economic value under our feet here. because those guys didn't do that kind of work if there wasn't some values. It took a lot more work than just using water as their excavation tool. And like I say, guys, understanding the limitations of what the old-timers were capable of doing or not doing. This is a caved-in drift hole that we've actually been using for a bunch of our logs and stuff for a burn pit. But it is a caved-in drift. It's a completely settled straight down, so they dug in underneath it. And as I go up the bench here, there's more and more evidence of the drifting that went on in the drainage, which it's a good indicator that there is values. This is a settled area here, and they got into some of the closer to bedrock here as we get along the control of this drainage. Here again we see a caved-in drift hole. So the tunnel probably came from downstream slightly, 45-degree angle up into trying to hit the bedrock if they could. Whether they did in here or not, I have a feeling it's quite a bit deeper than what they were capable of doing with the amount of water in this drainage. And the drift holes tend to be, in this part here, they're about 100 feet apart, which tells me part of that was hunting for value or hunting to try to see if they could get on bedrock. This drift hole we pushed into with a machine and put a brush pile in. The other side of the drainage, if I can get down in here a little bit, the bench, you can see the bench over across the drainage that exists, and that would be the outside corner on the water coming down the drainage. So there is some drift holes sunk. There's one right straight across right here from us, and there's another big one up there that they went way up kind of toward another drainage up in there. So it tells me that they were definitely looking for the values in there, and whether they could get below the water, because I'm right here, I'm only a couple feet above the water on the creek as it stands right now. And here is another caved-in drift hole. So they did drift both sides of the drainage, which is very, very interesting as to what the possibilities down in here, because we've got a lot of bench that goes over there, a good 100 yards almost, before you kind of hit what would be the control of the drainage again. So there's a lot of bench, probably anywhere from 10 to 20 feet overburden. We don't know until we trench it next spring, but this is what we're looking forward to possibly for next year for some mining. So it could be a lot of fun. So thanks for being with me here today, and I will try to get these videos up as soon as I can and get something out to you guys. Thanks, guys.